Too many episodes.
Weather like where you guys are in California?
We're getting ready for a big storm, actually. It's going to rain for like a week and flash flood advisories and wind.
Goodness.
So good thing we're doing this today because there's potential power outages.
Oh no.
Yeah, just the wind stuff.
Were you guys affected by the fires at all?
Just the smoke. Smoke was pretty bad here. We had fire up in Danny and I both live in Sonoma County, and there were fires north of us. And in Point Reyes National Seashore, actually, where our office is, they had a fairly significant fire. It is pretty intense year. Yeah, and we've had colleagues too in Monterey that have lost houses, so it's been a little stressful.
Yeah.
Starting to love winter.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Okay, 1 minute, one minute and 24 seconds, we will go live. Or I will begin the program. We're already live, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it says live on custom live streaming service.
Yes. There is a bit of a delay to the Film Fest website. I shut my door so the cats can't come in and crawl in front of my computer, which they always do. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 9th Annual Thunder Bay International Film Festival, coming to you virtually this year with the latest in independent ocean and Great Lakes films, and interactive discussions with filmmakers and scientists and educators like this evening's with our partners and our good friends at Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuary and Alexa Elliott with Changing Seas in PBS, Florida. So very excited to have our guests here tonight. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about the film festival and a little bit about Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary. The Thunder Bay International Film Festival is produced by Noaa's Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary, which is located off the shores of Northeast Michigan. It encompasses 4,300 square miles of northwestern Lake Huron. Thunder Bay is currently the only national marine sanctuary in fresh water in a national system of protected waters that stretches from the West Coast, which we'll be visiting tonight, to the East Coast, and from the Gulf of Mexico to American Samoa, south of the equator. Our mission here in Thunder Bay is to protect an amazing collection of historic shipwrecks. You can learn more about these shipwrecks at thunderbay.noaa.gov. And when the ice melts, you can visit them by diving, snorkeling, or even aboard a glass bottom boat. Now let's get to what you came here for tonight, and that's to talk to our amazing guests. So I'd like to ask our guests to please introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about your background, what you do, and where you're coming in to us from tonight, and also your role in the films that we'll be talking about tonight. And I'd like to start with Alexa.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us tonight. This is super fun. Like you said, my name is Alexa Elliott, and I am coming to you from Fort Lauderdale. I work for South Florida PBS, which is one of the public television stations in Florida. And I work on a series called Changing Seas, which is a marine science series that we started 13 years ago now. And we travel all over meeting different scientists to learn about their work and tell our viewers more about what's happening with the oceans, how they're changing, how they're being researched, just to kind of raise awareness of ocean issues. And I am the series producer for that program, and I produced this particular episode.
Excellent. How about you, Jenny?
Hi, everybody. I'm Jenny Stock, and I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator for NOAA's Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuary, which is off the coast of Marin County, Sonoma County, California, about 50 miles northwest of San Francisco. I live in Sonoma County personally, and I bring the sanctuary to people from the very remote offshore nature of Cordell Bank to people all around our communities here, but nationwide as well, through virtual programs, student programs, teacher professional development programs, curriculum, films. I host a monthly radio program on our community radio station. And we've also worked on a lot of exhibits to help bring this place to people. So I've been with the sanctuary about 20 years. And really happy to be here tonight with everybody.
All right, your turn, Danny.
Hi, I'm Danny Lipsky. I'm the research coordinator at Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuary. I'm calling from my home in Petaluma, California, not too far from Jenny. And I have been with the sanctuary program for about 15, going on 16 years. I've been at Cordell Bank for, let's see, about 7 or 8 years now. And my job is to lead and run our science program. Our science program is focused on understanding the conditions in the sanctuary and bringing that toward to management so we can protect and manage the sanctuary to the best of our abilities. And my job involves some of the field work that you'll see highlighted in the film, as well as doing a lot of coordination with partners and scientists and my regional and national colleagues, and interpreting that science in partnership with working with Jenny to get our science out there to other audiences.
This is pretty exciting that we have both the research side and the education and outreach side of Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuary represented here tonight. So that's pretty much the whole kit and caboodle. Get a really good idea of this very special place off the West Coast. I am sad to say I have never visited the actual Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuary. And I'd like to ask both Danny and Jenny, have you been able to actually dive under the waves there and experience it? I know it's a little bit remote. Jenny, how about you first?
Well, Cordell is not a very easy place to scuba dive. So we have something called the Cordell Club, where only a few people have been able to dive there on scuba, and that has not been me. Our highest pinnacle is 115 feet below the surface, so that's the shallowest point where you would start, and that's like a needle in the haystack. So it's pretty tough diving there. I have had the opportunity, however, to be in a submersible and dive on Cordell Bank. Way back when I had started, we had worked with a submersible company to do undersea observations, and I was like, hey, I'm the educator, I need to see this place really exists. And so I was so lucky to have an opportunity to go underwater and actually be in the Cordell Bank vicinity, which was really an incredible experience to actually see it through the porthole of the submersible.
That's very, very cool. I imagine that there's lots of different ways to visit the site. I mean, that's an important part of both your job, but getting people access to the site. So Danny, I'm sure you've been able to access it in different ways yourself.
Yes, but I have also never dove on Cordell Bank. I did used to be a diver for NOAA back in my days when I was working at the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary, but I have never been in the water at Cordell Bank, but I do visit it quite a bit for my job during normal non-COVID times. But it is a really tough place to get to. Even on our research vessel, we get weathered out quite a bit. So it's not just for day trippers going out there in a little boat. It's really kind of a tough place to get to. So Jenny has her work cut out for her, and that she really needs to bring the sanctuary to people, because not a lot of people can get out to the sanctuary. So that's one of our challenges.
Makes it very important for products like the film that is featured in the film festival, Changing Seas. So Alexa, tell us a little bit about how you came to do a film based in Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuary.
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit of a crazy story, actually. So our crew was out in the Riviera archipelago in Mexico filming a program on giant manta rays. And the lead scientist that was part of that program, his name is Dr. Bob Rubin, who is on the Sanctuary Foundation board for Cordell. And he had a Cordell hat. And while we were all on the boat together in Mexico, he kept saying, you know, you should really think about coming up to California where I live and do something on this amazing place. And he kept telling me about it. So we finished the manta program. And after that was done, I reached back out to Bob and I said, well, you know, we had never filmed in California before. That was the first time in cold water, really anything cold water related that we were working on. And so I said to Bob, is there any way we can make this happen to bring our crew out? And he pulled a lot of strings and introduced me to Danny and Jenny and a bunch of their colleagues. So that's kind of how we got to find out about Cordell in a very roundabout way, so to speak. But I was really, really excited that we did. And I owe Bob a huge, bit of gratitude because he really made a lot of things happen for us, from housing to you name it, while we were there.
Well, that's incredible. Those sanctuary champions are very important to the work that we all do, for sure. And those connections are important. So continuing talking about the film, tell us a little bit about what goes into making a program like this, especially the new challenges that you faced in cold water.
Well, that's a great point. It touches upon what Danny and Jenny was just talking about, the fact that you can't really go and visit Cordell Bank, right? And so even though we usually scuba dive on the locations that we film, this was way beyond any of our skill set. And so that really provided a lot of challenges. Is how do you tell a story about a place that you can't actually physically visit? And we wouldn't have been able to do it without the amazing underwater footage that already exists that Jennifer had access to. And then a group of divers, the Bowie group from San Francisco, had a lot of footage as well that they had been collecting during their dives. That very elite group of divers that's able to go down and get footage there. So that was key. Without that, we wouldn't have been able to tell the story. And then we really tried to look at what kind of research happens out there. So we were, as you saw, able to go out with Danny's team on the Access cruises and really learn how they study that habitat, and then work with some other people, other scientists from the university to kind of learn a little bit about the aspects that they're looking at when they're researching the area.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much to tell. It's really challenging to decide what to include and not to include, because there's so much great work happening. So that was definitely a tough part.
In working with filmmakers, in my experience here leading the film festival, that has been my biggest question. Like, it's one thing to go out and shoot footage, but how do you tell the story with that footage and take what could be 300 hours worth of footage and turn it into a really concise program that still delivers the messages you want, like you were very successful at doing. I think I can't even fathom being an editor and doing that. So thank you for your work, for sure. Talking about accessibility, here in Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary, I mentioned in the beginning that we have hundreds of shipwrecks, and many of ours are not accessible. They're very, very deep. And as we know, very few people actually scuba dive. So that accessibility is so important. We do have some shallow ones that you don't even have to get wet to see, but you guys don't have that similar access. And so, Jenny, you mentioned in the beginning all the programs that you do to bring the sanctuary to the people. Can you share just a couple of specific examples of those programs? Because they're really, I was looking at your website today, refreshing myself on your programs, and there's some really unique, cool opportunities out there.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think this is one of the things that's really kept me so engaged for so long. I've been here 20 years, is the ultimate challenge of continually bringing something to people, making the unseen seen. And there's so many ways to engage with that in a way where the world we're in right now, hunkering down to stay safe from COVID. It's this virtual world that we've kind of already been very well poised for. But it's just me. I'm an education team of one. So spread in a couple different ways. And one of the things that's been amazing is especially collaborating with Danny and science and some of the opportunities we've had through the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries to bring the sanctuary to people through the telepresence opportunities on the exploration vessel Nautilus and the Ocean Exploration Trust, and having the opportunity to be out at sea in the sanctuary on a boat with remotely operated vehicles in the water, researching these habitats we've never seen before, and being able to be live with people around the world on the boat, talking to them about what we're seeing and exploring, but also interacting with students during some short programs to just talk about what we're doing out there and what we saw. And to me, that's been one of the most gratifying experiences, because you really get to be in the sanctuary and share the amazing work that we're doing with people real time. So those have been wonderful, opportunistic things that we've done. One of the other things is bringing the beauty of this underwater world that most people are not going to get to see because it's so deep and so far offshore. But the bank itself, what the main feature of the sanctuary, is so colorful. It's this technicolor environment of pinks and purples and greens and yellows, and it's just beautiful. And so I really get a lot of satisfaction bringing that to people and then being like, wow. So I do that a lot through imagery in exhibits, video, and photos. We've had a couple great partnerships where we bring sanctuary content to exhibits. We have a rather big exhibit at the Oakland Museum of California, which is an amazing museum in Oakland that features natural sciences, arts, and history of California. And they feature Cordell Bank as one of the habitats in the Natural Sciences Gallery. And there's some beautiful video footage. It feels like you're really immersed there, getting to see that and learning about seabirds and other aspects of the bank. So that's been a project that I'm really proud happened during my time here, to share that with so many other people. We also have a little visitor center out at the Point Reyes National Seashore Historic Lighthouse. They have a visitor center out at the Headlands, and we were able to add on to it, making a little ocean center that overlooks both the Greater Farallones and Cordell Bank sanctuaries out the window, but also have these beautiful murals depicting the habitats underwater, as well as some models. And it's a nice place to be, and you can smell the ocean and feel the wind outside and then learn about the sanctuary in there. Right now I'm starting up a virtual classroom visit program where I can meet classrooms online and just do a little presentation about different topics related to the sanctuary, since that is the mode of learning right now happening throughout the country. And then a lot of other personal products too through our website. As I said earlier, I do a monthly radio program on our community radio station, KWMR. And sadly, that's just a little bit on pause right now while I'm teleworking at home with my family working at home and schooling at home. So I've had to take a little break, but I'm hoping to get back to that at some point when they can carve out some space in my closet probably to record. But that's been a really great way to connect with our local community, bringing ocean content to folks. I also save that as a podcast. People can find all our past episodes on our website, but also through iTunes, the podcast called Ocean Currents. So those are just a couple of the things that I've enjoyed doing, and I'm always looking for new ways. The biggest thing I'm looking forward to doing, I'm hoping in the future, is working with virtual reality and seeing if we can get some really great cameras down there to bring it to people to experience in a three-dimensional way, because I think it's one of the most ways people can really feel awe and appreciation is to feel that immersion.
Oh, for sure. I love the diversity of the programs. If somebody's interested in radio, I mean, any type of input, it sounds like you guys are really meeting that. And so delivering all that content, let's talk about the content with the research coordinator, Danny. So what the film features and focuses on the research program Access. Will you please tell our audience what that acronym is and what kind of work they do and what sort of things do they discover?
Sure, yeah, it's an acronym, Applied California Current Ecosystem Studies, and this is a project that's been going on since 2004. It was on a little bit of a pause this past year. We're hoping to get back to it, but it is a long-term program for us. It's unfortunate we've had a little break in it, but we'll be back out there. And the the purpose of the project is to understand the ecosystem, ocean ecosystem in Cordell Bank and Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuaries. We even get down into Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary a little bit. And we look at the distribution and abundance of predators, the seabirds and the marine mammals, and their prey, the fish and the krill, the zooplankton, and the ocean conditions that allow those conditions to thrive. And by putting those things together, we can look at kind of the whole pelagic ecosystem, the open ocean ecosystem, and by looking at it over time, we can understand how it has these patterns and variations and how it might be changing over time in response to different conditions out there.
Wow, that's incredible. So have you found that the data and the work of Access has helped protect the resources of the sanctuary and help management decisions?
Yeah, it really has. It's been a really valuable program, and we collect so much data on so many different things with Alexa and her team captured so well. And sometimes when we start collecting some of the data, we don't actually know how meaningful it's going to be in the future, but we collect it over the years, and then we can start to look at these patterns and see they kind of come to light. And so, for example, for how we've been able to use a couple of examples for how we've been able to use this for management is that by doing these studies year over year, we see patterns in the distribution of the marine mammals and the seabirds. And so we start to understand where these hot spots are in the sanctuary. And then we can start to think about, well, what are the human activities and how do they overlap with where the animals are using the sanctuary? And one area where that has come into play really significantly for us is our efforts to reduce ship strikes to whales. So these big ships that come into San Francisco Bay, they're really put at risk, the whales that just can't get out of the way at ships, and the ships will strike them. And so by understanding where these whales are in the sanctuary, we have been able to use that information to inform what we've asked ships to do. We've asked them to slow down, and the lanes years ago were moved in a way that reduced the overlap of the ships and the whales. And we're still continuing to use and gather more data to think about how can we do even better, and how can we think about, how to keep the whales safe from the ships. So that's one example. Another management issue that's been particularly big lately is about whale entanglement, looking at the whales again, where they are and the overlap of the fisheries and their gear, crab fishery, but also other fisheries that have gear in the water that whales can get entangled in. So we have an understanding of where the whales are in different conditions. Our data shows that sometimes they might be more offshore or more onshore. So if we can help to inform, when we have these conditions, the whales are going to be closer to where the fishing gear is, then that can be used by managers to think about how to time the fishery and the different regulations. So those are a couple of examples about how we've used the data to help protect animals in the sanctuary.
I think those direct, specific examples are great to have and to showcase in these films. I don't know if you caught the Gray's Reef live stream that we did earlier today. If you didn't and you were busy working, that's understandable. Maybe you guys were sleeping still then, but on West Coast time. But they were also, the Gray's Reef folks were talking about how they've seen an increase in calving, in whale calving. Did you guys see anything like that this past year out in Cordell Bank?
We didn't. So the whales in our area generally, they calve in other areas, so mainly down in Mexico or Central America. So then they come up to feed in our area. That's primarily what they do. Here, when we see them, is in the summer and in the fall during these prime feeding months. And of course, we haven't been out there to really know what's going on. But one thing that we will have some data on in the future that other people are studying is thinking about how these COVID restrictions and reduction in humans in the environment could be affecting the sound in the ocean. And we have a project that's looking at sound in the ocean that wasn't featured in the film, but it's another project that I work on in partnership with Noaa and Oregon State University. We have a recorder on the deep in the ocean, and it records for 2 years at a time, and it's still down in the ocean, and we don't get the data back until we go collect it. So in the future, we will have some data about, have there been changes in the sound in the ocean because of COVID? But I have heard other people studying that too, and thinking, especially like cruise ships are very noisy and haven't been in near coastal areas like in Alaska, where they have a lot of whales and cruise ship activity. So there are some potential benefits to some of the COVID restrictions.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Speaking of sound, we are here in Thunder Bay looking at doing some sound ecology studies as well. You might not think that the Great Lakes are very noisy. Well, they're definitely not very noisy compared to the ocean. And no, we don't have any whales or sharks, but there's definitely sound ecology studies in the Great Lakes. So we're excited to be a part of that system-wide sanctuary study. And just a reminder for our audience, it is on the Film Festival website, but we're connecting here from Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary, the only freshwater, with Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuary all the way out on the West Coast. So just a reminder that we're part of a really fascinating, important system in America. And so, Alexa, I do want to get back to the science here in a bit and ask more about the seabirds, which I'm fascinated about. But I want to ask Alexa, because I know you said 13 years you've been doing this program, and I can just imagine, well, I've seen many of your programs. I know some of the amazing places you visited. How was Cordell Bank compared to those other places you visited? And well, I have a follow-up question that I'll ask when you're done.
Well, it's so hard to say because, really what's been so much fun working on this series is that every topic is completely different and unique, and that's, I think, what's kept me interested all along. And what I loved about the Cordell Bank is when you go to Northern California, especially coming from a place like Florida that's very tropical, it's a very different ocean. And when you're at the surface, the way it looks, you would never, ever imagine that it would be so colorful and just so amazingly beautiful, at depth. And that was something that really I felt was something that we really wanted to share with our audience, because it's so unique and intriguing that there's this whole secret world down below that you would never know about if it weren't for the few who have been able to go down there and capture some of this footage. I don't think that is what you would expect off the coast of California, at least not if you're not, very well versed in the science like Danny is. So I think the average person would never assume that was down there. And to me, that was really intriguing to bring that to a wider audience.
Yes, and you demonstrated that very well in the program. And so the audience out here tonight may have already seen the program, but if they haven't, we're hoping they're inspired to watch it after listening to you all discuss it. What would you, if you guys had one sentence that you could say to inspire someone to go and watch the film, and remember, audience, you can watch it through January 31st on the Film Festival website. I'll start with you, Alexa. What would you say to somebody to encourage them to watch the film?
Oh gosh, that's tough because I'm so close to it, right? As a producer, it's hard to get that perspective, but just to be, I guess, surprised by what you might learn. You might discover something you've not ever heard about or are familiar with. It's not your, a lot of ocean films, there's so many ocean films and a lot of them cover dolphins and whales and all of that's really important and great. But this is definitely something very unique that I don't think you will often come across elsewhere.
Okay, Danny, your turn.
Yeah, I think when I talk to people about Cordell Bank, I think they're often surprised that something like that even exists in California, right? So close to San Francisco. So I think that people, they don't even know about coral, that there are corals in the deep sea and in cold water. So I think it's an opportunity to see something that you, might not have known was even there.
All
All right, Jenny, your turn if the dog is, or maybe the dog can answer.
Sorry, I thought I would have some help here today, but anyway, I think the biodiversity is really well highlighted in the film. Beautiful footage of the bank itself, as well as our most recent stuff on the deeper habitats. It's really nice to see all together, as well as interviews with all these folks that have been involved in learning about and spending time out there. So I think the interviews are awesome. And I have to say, Alexa, real kudos to your team of getting out there, because a lot of our time we get weathered out, and we just had like a limited window to bring out the interview team, and we were very lucky to actually get them out there. So they're very lucky they got to go out.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, since this is a film festival and we very likely have a lot of filmmakers in our audience, Alexa, I want to ask you a question unrelated to the topic of the film, but related to the aspect of filmmaking. And I'm also excited that we have an all-female panel here tonight. And so if there were a young woman out there, a young girl who was interested in becoming a filmmaker, an underwater filmmaker, what would you advise them to do?
You know, that's actually a great question, and amazingly something I've never thought much about in terms of like from the perspective of a female versus a male. I think our industry, for the most part, at least in my personal experience, there's never been, I think it's been very like equal. I've never encountered any challenges because of being a female. But I think what I would say to either a woman or a guy is just, you know, you really have to enjoy research, writing. A lot of people think like that all we do is go out in the field and have these amazing adventures. And while we do get to do that, that's like 5% of our job. There's a lot of like, just like in science, a lot of, you know, tedious stuff. Like, so let's say we're out there filming, right? We come back with 40 hours or so of footage that needs to be condensed then into a half hour. So you need to actually log every clip, organize it, you know, transcribe all the interviews. So there's a lot of that kind of thing. But I think my personal background is in journalism. So I went to, both of my degrees are in broadcast journalism. That's not a requirement, but that was definitely helpful for me. But we've worked with a lot of people on our team who are in the producing side who have more of a background in marine science and want to go into the science communication aspect of things. And that's worked out really well for us as well.
Excellent to hear that background. And it just made me think of a live stream we did yesterday with Detroit Public Television, who has a number of programs throughout the festival. And I asked one of the filmmakers and producers, and he said, being prepared for opportunity. And that's simple, but so true. Be prepared for what you want to do. So when the opportunity comes, you're ready. So both, I'd like to address that same question to both Danny and Jenny. You guys have amazing careers out there working in ocean science and then communicating that science. What would you tell somebody, Jenny, who was interested in pursuing that same career path?
Yeah, I think I love that quote you just said about be prepared for opportunity. I think that is really a great thing to think about with thinking about relationships you have with people and networking and just getting to know and hear about different aspects. For me, I started out, studying biology in college and realizing early on that I really loved sharing nature with people. And I immediately got into working as a seasonal park ranger with the National Park Service, which was just a great foundation for building on that as a career. And then I went on and taught at some environmental education facilities in California. One was on Catalina Island, where I took students snorkeling and diving and kayaking, and then also local in the Bay Area. And then I had been pondering, the idea of settling into a job with the National Park Service, but was having a hard time finding a position that was permanent. And it was through a former colleague of mine that told me about the position with the sanctuary to consider applying for. And I wouldn't have known that unless I had been in touch with her. And so it was really nice to have that network, and then was able to apply, and so lucky to get it. And for me, it's just a blending of a lot of different of my passions. I love the ocean. I love communicating about the ocean, and I really love continually learning and working with science and communicating science that we're learning all the time is something that really drives me. So I think it's really a couple different things of building on what you love and following the little strings that lead you to what you enjoy doing, and maintaining relationships with people to make sure you know about opportunities that come up.
All right, excellent answer. It's all about the people, really. How about you, Danny? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling kind of removed now from my days when I was becoming a marine biologist, and it seems to have changed a lot for young people. There's so many opportunities out there now, and just, like we've done had so many great interns and worked with young people who are getting involved in the field, and that just seems to be such a great way to learn about different opportunities and see if it's something that you like or not, and even if something is maybe not quite exactly what you would have selected, but it might just be a pathway. It might just open a door for you to meet somebody or to even find out, no, that's not exactly what I want to do. And just to get the experience, and also just to be really willing. The people who come out on the boat with us are just really willing to just I'll carry those boxes onto the boat, or like, it's not rocket science. It's it's not glamorous at all, but just being really willing to pitch in and be part of the team and do the hard work that it takes to get things done. We're constantly getting sprayed with salt water and like all kinds of unglamorous kinds of things, but that's what it takes to do marine science sometimes.
I think being sprayed with salt water sounds pretty lovely right now. It's about 18 degrees here in Alpena, Michigan. So, and I know the salt water is not very warm out there where you're at, but so let's get back into the science and the gathering of the science. Danny, I know that a lot of the footage that the scuba divers collect, and that other ways of collecting footage are through an ROV. Can you tell our audience what an ROV is? What does that stand for, and how do you use them in your scientific research?
Yeah, an ROV is a remotely operated vehicle, and so it's this tool that we use that has cameras, still cameras, and video, and it has little propellers on it. It's connected to the boat by a tether, so it's operated from the vessel. There's nobody in the ROV. It's not the same thing as a submersible like Jenny was talking about earlier. So we can, from the surface on the boat, run the ROV to take pictures and imagery along the seafloor, and some of that you'll see in the episode, that some of that was collected with the ROV. What the ROV allows us to do is to collect imagery at depths and in places and over time that we would not normally be able to do. As we've talked about, it's really difficult to dive on Cordell Bank, and even the divers that do dive on Cordell Bank, they have about maybe 15-20 minutes or so on the bottom once they get there, because of the limitations of the gases and their supplies. So we can stay down for hours and hours, days even, and collect that imagery. You can even collect environmental samples in terms of using sensors to detect the temperature and salinity, dissolved oxygen, and we can collect samples using a little manipulator arm, that kind of a little claw that can grab some of the specimens for us. And so we use that to just understand, take pictures of what is on that we call that the benthic habitat, the seafloor habitat, and to learn about that environment.
Very interesting. A very useful tool for sure, those remotely operated vehicles. Here in Thunder Bay, we have a competition every year where students design their own remotely operated vehicles and battle it out. So we're looking forward to hopefully doing that again soon once things get back to normal. Danny, another question about the science. I want to know about discovering new species in Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuary. And then I'm going to go back to Jenny, and I want to hear what some of the favorite species are that your audience is like. But first, Danny, tell us if any new discoveries recently.
Yeah, that's been a really exciting thing for us. And mainly because there's two things. The technology has been developing to have better and better cameras that we can detect things better, but also we are going to new places that we've never been before. So in 2015, the sanctuary expanded and included new deep habitat, which we started exploring in 2017. We've had two fantastic opportunities to work with Ocean Exploration Trust and their EV Nautilus, and they have a really fancy ROV that can go really deep, take spectacular imagery and samples, all while it is streaming live to the internet so that anybody with an internet connection can see what we're seeing. And so in 2017 and 2019, we went to parts of the sanctuary that had never been explored before, and we we recorded species that are known to science, but we had never recorded in the sanctuary just because we hadn't looked there. But we also had some great opportunities to collect some samples and to have some new species to describe. So one was a sponge that was described by the late Dr. Henry Reiswig, Varia cordelli, and we've also had another tiny little yellow sponge that had on Cordell Bank, so not in a very deep habitat, somewhere where we've looked before in the past, but just very small and never been collected. So we collected that, and that was described by our partner, Dr. Gary Williams, who's at the California Academy of Science. So it's pretty exciting that, and also telling that there's so much we don't know about the ocean that pretty much every time we go out there, we're finding new things.
Oh, yes, for sure. That is very exciting. Jenny, so you get to talk about all these critters. I can say critters because I'm just an archaeologist. You get to talk about these critters to your audiences of all different ages. What are they most interested in? I would say, looking at your videos on your website, the mola mola, I wasn't even thinking you guys had those, but it makes total sense that you do. And how neat would that be to see one of those? What other animals are people fascinated with, Jenny?
Well, definitely the whales. We have, just to back up a little bit too, for folks who may not have seen the film yet, the Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuary is really one of the most productive places on the West Coast, along with our other West Coast sanctuaries, because of the California current ecosystem that we have here, which provides a lot of nutrients at the surface through upwelling and really stimulates an amazing food web. So from Olympic Coast National Marine Sanctuary to Farallones, Cordell, and Monterey Bay and Channel Islands, these 5 West Coast sanctuaries are really tied together by this amazing system, which draw in animals that migrate from really far away to come feed in these areas. So for Cordell, we have blue whales and humpback whales that come to visit us in the summer and fall months to feed on that seasonal abundance. We also have seabirds that travel from all around the Pacific Ocean to come here. And in addition to the locals, we have local breeding seabirds that breed on the Farallon Islands and nearshore California coast that benefit from this food. And then there's the underwater environment, right? All the invertebrates and fish that are just so abundant because of all the food in the water. So we have just a total mix of stuff from the microscopic plankton to the mighty blue whale. And I think that's one of the stories that is so exciting, is we have so much biodiversity in this region. Some of the stories that we've been able to tell and are very intriguing to people are these migratory stories of seabirds. The Black-Footed Albatrosses that come to Cordell Bank, they breed in the Papahana-Mokuakea Marine National Monument, another one of our sister sites in our program. And they breed there, and then they spend their whole lives on the North Pacific Ocean feeding, and we see them a lot at Cordell Bank. So it's a hot spot for them to feed here. And thinking about all the things they encounter while they're out at sea on the open ocean, to me, is really fascinating. They have to deal with the wind, the waves, the food, plastic, longline fisheries, a myriad of different issues, and still they're survivors. And it's just, to me, the adaptations that seabirds face on the big ocean are just amazing, and I think really cool stories to tell. We also have shearwaters that come up from New Zealand and also from Chile, and they come up and feed in this region. So it's those huge migrations that I think are really fascinating to people too, to think, a bird might travel a couple thousand miles to get food for its chick, when I was nursing my little baby, it was like hard to get down the street. So I think those are some fascinating stories to tell, to really build the awe and wonder about the ocean that we have at Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuary because of those incredible migration stories due to the productivity that we have here.
I really like that.
Birds.
I learned a lot in that answer, because I hadn't thought of it that way, that the really compelling part and is the migration. So just in that, in telling about the critters that live there, you're teaching some science there as well. Really, really interesting.
That's definitely part of Bob's pitch when he first told us about Cordell. He was mentioning the seabirds, and that really intrigued me too when we first started researching that's these incredibly long distances that these birds travel. That's just says a lot about the productivity of the place for for them to expend that much energy to get there.
Yeah, a very special place. So Alexa, you have filmed in other national marine sanctuaries. Can you tell our audience which one? I won't ask you to say your favorite. That's what I've been asking other guests, but I won't do that. Because the only correct answer is Thunder Bay. So I won't even ask. But tell us about the other sanctuaries you visited and films you've done in them, and maybe films we can expect from them.
Sure. And to be completely honest, I actually don't have a favorite. They're all so unique and different, and they each have something different that's really amazing. Being based in Miami, of course, we've done quite a bit of work in the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. That goes back to the very first episode. The most recent one we've filmed quite a bit of in the sanctuary is a program called Corals in Crisis, which I know you're screening this year, that all focuses on stony coral tissue loss disease, which is a huge problem here in Florida and now has spread to the rest of the Caribbean. So that was produced by one of my colleagues. Then we had the amazing experience right before COVID hit. We were out in American Samoa. I think we left literally within a day or two from today, a year ago, and we worked with your colleagues there. So that was incredible. We got to dive on some of the largest corals described in the world, which I'll definitely never forget. So that show was a lot of fun to work on because we worked with a number of different partners and were able to include a lot about the local culture as well, which is really fascinating. We've worked with the team out in Hawaii on a couple of occasions, actually. We did one episode on humpback whale research that's really cool, that aired a couple of years ago. And then we went back last March. That was the last thing we did before everything came to a screeching halt, because we're working on a follow-up episode to that program, looking at what happened to the whales after they've been delisted, the humpback whales that travel between Hawaii and Alaska. And so the initial plan was to film in Hawaii in the spring and then go to Alaska in the summertime. And of course, we couldn't go to Alaska last summer. So we're fingers crossed hoping to be able to do that this summer so we can finish that program. And I think I want to make sure I'm not leaving anyone out. I think that's it, but we've done a number of different programs in the Florida Keys. One also that I know you're featuring this year, that's a little bit different, focusing more on archaeology, is the Sunken Stories episode we did years ago, that looked at the discovery of some of the sunken slave ships that are in the Keys, and there's a great group of African American divers who helped document some of those shipwrecks. So that was a wonderful partnership working with them as well.
Yes, I'm glad you brought up those other films. Great opportunities to see the amazing program Changing Seas, and we have had 2 live stream events scheduled with the Diving with a Purpose group, who has done work on the corals, and also with the Sunken Stories. So stay tuned for more information about those live streams. The second one coming up this Friday, and the other one is recorded. So what an awesome job. You get to go dive all around. Do you get to dive on every site you go to? I know you didn't with Cordell Bank because we've discussed the accessibility, but other places, do you get to dive everywhere you go?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I can't think of any other restrictions. I mean, Cordell was really just, we don't possess that kind of skill set to do that.
Right.
And, just even finding a time frame, even if we were qualified, the local divers don't even get to go out every year because the window of getting the right weather is so narrow. But yeah, other than that, I think for the most part, yes, the very few times are there limitations where maybe permit requirements only allow our camera person to be in the water. That was the case, for example, with the humpback whales, of course, because there's lots of restrictions to not harm the whales. So in that instance, the permit allowed for our cameraman to get in the water. But other than that, yeah, usually whoever the producer is usually the dive buddy for the camera person, which is a really sweet perk.
Right. It's a tough job. Well, talking about these special places and particularly the accessibility of Cordell Bank, if it's so remote, and way under the water, how was it discovered in the first place? Jenny, do you want to give a stab at answering that one?
Yeah, sure. It's actually a really cool story in terms of timeline. And, we had a lot of exploration happening along the West Coast in the 1800s with the gold rush in San Francisco. And so there was this rush about navigation and safety. So lighthouses and prospecting for that. We have a very rugged shoreline in California. So there were a lot of shipwrecks from transporting goods up into San Francisco. So during these early surveys, George Davidson was a prominent surveyor, and a lot of things are named after George Davidson Seamount and the Davidson Current. So he was out there and kind of lost in the fog in an area. They didn't really totally know where they were. And so at the time, the technology was lead line technology, and they had a heavy weight as end of a very long rope, and they throw it overboard, and then they measure in fathoms on the way up, which is an arm length, how many fathoms, great shoulder building exercise, it is to the seafloor. And so he found it could be in a somewhat shallow area and wondered, this is not what he expected. Did a couple more soundings and was like, there's some shallow shoal here. And sent out another surveyor years later named Edward Cordell, who the bank is then named after. And Edward Cordell further mapped it with the same technology. And so it got itself on a map then and laid there undiscovered really until the 1970s. And this is the cool part I love about the story, because there was just a curious, interested scientist in the East Bay, Bob Schmuter. He's with us today, I'm sure. He founded a group called Cordell Expeditions that he was like, I got to find out what this Cordell Bank is all about, because he saw it on the chart and he was like, I don't know anything about that, and started doing research, and nobody knew anything about Cordell Bank biologically. And so he put together a group of divers to go find the bank and start diving on it, which in the 70s and 80s is, not as much technology as we have now, and is pretty amazing what they did. There's shipping lanes that go through there. As we've talked about several times, ominous weather with big winds, big waves. But this group of divers, they kept coming back, and they started acquiring imagery, photos, and samples. And Bob, being a scientist, really set up a scientific study with the samples and getting them to be identified with experts, brought in this whole team of people. And that got the attention of the Sanctuary Program, and the Sanctuary Program found out about it, and Bob nominated it to become a National Marine Sanctuary, and it was designated in 1989. And what I think is so cool about this story is that you can be just a curious person and follow your passion, and some amazing stewardship can come out of it. That leadership that Bob had really resulted in this nationally recognized marine protected area as part of the National Marine Sanctuary System, just by being a curious, enthusiastic person. And I just think that's so cool, because it wasn't like a government agency that said, we're going to go explore this and protect it. It was just a person, just like any of us. And I think that's just a really neat thing to think about when we follow our passions, that really amazing things can happen as a result of that curiosity.
Oh, that's an excellent story. I did not know that about the discovery. So the scientist recognizing the value of the place. So speaking of the science, back to Danny again. I'm the research coordinator here in Thunder Bay, and I know that we're all faced with challenges of managing and doing science and doing research in a vast area. You guys are what, 1,296, is that right? Square miles? Did I get it right?
1286, I think. Oh, yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Well, we have 400 square miles, and so that's a lot of area, and we're not, a lot of people. Staffs are pretty small. So Danny, could you talk just a little bit about how you get science done in the sanctuary with all your partners, academic partners, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I've been here since 2013, 2013, and some of the programs that I work on, like Access, started way before me, so I can't take credit for that. People had the foresight to say, we're going to start sampling this and to get it going and keep it going. And the seafloor discoveries started early as well. There were a lot of studies in the early 2000s with the submersibles on the seafloor. So some of that work was begun a long time ago, and my approach has been to just try and keep these programs going, expand them, strengthen them. And where my passion really is about making sure that we are collecting data that can be used to inform management. And so, designing studies and working with partners to make sure that we are doing, getting the data that we will need. And so the way that we do that is we do have a lot of partnerships. The episode describes that partnership with Point Blue Conservation Science really well. We work with universities as well. But in a way, we're kind of different from some of the other sanctuaries. I'm not sure how it is at Thunder Bay, but some of the other sanctuaries in California that are maybe closer to the shore, there's a lot more researchers working there doing their own kind of independent studies. But a lot of the work that happens at Cordell Bank is because we're involved and we're doing it. There's just it's just a little sparser out there. So we have to be really efficient with our time and our resources. So we focus on targeted programs to look at the seafloor. And we have part of our seafloor studies program is to not just explore, but then to characterize in a systematic way, and then to return to places and monitor over time. And that's kind of the same thing with our Access program, is monitoring over time, looking at change. That's just a really important way of looking at things if you're going to be using data for management, is to know what's happening over the long term, as well as our project to look at the oceanographic conditions and the hypoxia on the bank and our soundscape surveys. So kind of these really targeted projects that look at a specific ecosystem component and then try and keep that going over time so we can really understand those changes. And a lot of that is coming to fruition right now because we are in the process of doing a big report called a condition report, which every sanctuary does, to look at the status and trends of conditions in our sanctuary, so that we can then create a management plan to address those conditions. And so we're being able to use a lot of that data in our condition report, and it's been really applicable.
Oh, that's wonderful. Just talking about the deploying the scientific method to the resources, even though we have very different resources here in Thunder Bay, it is the basic premise of, look for, document, and then monitor. It's what we do with our shipwrecks out here, because they change over time as well. So we have a few minutes left, and I have a question for each of you. People love to hear about the animals. We talked about that a little bit already. And Alexa, I'm going to start with you, because I think you've probably been to the most places out of all of us, it sounds like. It's a two-part question. What is your favorite critter that you've seen underwater? And then what is your dream critter to see that you haven't seen yet?
Gosh, dream critter would probably be a narwhal. That would be really, really amazing to go to the Arctic underwater, or a polar bear too. I think one of the critters that we got to work with recently, I love them all. It's really hard to have a favorite, but I really love penguins. And this is kind of actually a funny story. I know I mentioned earlier how we learned about the Cordell Bank by working with Dr. Bob Rubin in Mexico. Well, through working on the Cordell Bank program, Jaime, who is part of Point Blue and part of the Access team, actually introduced me to some colleagues of his in Peru. He's from Peru. And through this connection, we were able to film in Peru and do a story on the Humboldt penguins. That's something we filmed about a year ago that was in our most recent season. And they are just absolutely adorable. And that was a real highlight, getting to spend a lot of time, among penguins.
That sounds amazing.
Them all.
Excellent answer. Jenny, you had mentioned earlier about the visitor center. We do have a question from the audience. Will you tell the audience again where the visitor center is and how people can visit?
Sure. Well, we don't actually have a visitor center that we run and maintain, but we have partnered with a couple other organizations that have visitor centers that are open to the public. I guess in a modified sense right now. Hopefully they'll be open again to real people soon. But we have exhibits at Point Reyes National Seashore, which is in Marin County, California, both at their main visitor center and out at the Point Reyes Lighthouse. And then we have a really big exhibit, a big gallery actually at the Oakland Museum of California. And it's a pretty big gallery, 4,000 square foot gallery. And that's really the most immersive of the places that we've partnered with. There's also a visitor center, I will say Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary is a visitor center, and they have a nice visitor center that's about this ecosystem as well. Not so much about Cordell Bank, but about this ecosystem in general.
Very interesting. Danny, my question to you is a little bit different. Rather than your favorite animal that you've dove with perchance, but how about your most exciting discovery? And you did touch on the ones you've recently made. You might say again that yellow sponge that was discovered, but talk a little bit. I mean, how exciting to be immersed in a job where you're making new discoveries. Do you have a favorite one?
Yeah, that was pretty exciting. When we first did our first trip on the Nautilus in 2017, and we went to Bodega Canyon, and the only studies that had been at Bodega Canyon were in the most shallow end of it, up at about 500 meters or so. We were down, close to 3,000 meters, and so we didn't really. And the shallower surveys, they hadn't really found all that much, and we weren't sure if we were going to be, if we were going to get down there and not see anything and just see mud, and it would have taken us a long time to get there and a lot of money. But when we got down there, we saw corals right away. We saw black corals, and we didn't know that we had those in our sanctuary. We thought we did, but there had never been any observations, so we hadn't looked there. So I think the discoveries and seeing that really deep habitat for the very first time was really exciting.
That's very cool. Black corals. Wow. Well, we are out of time, so you're off the hook, Jenny, for a favorite something or other to answer. But I want to remind our audience that there are a number of Changing Seas productions and films to watch throughout the film festival. Remember, you can watch through January 31st. And I've been inspired to rewatch the Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuary Changing Seas program after talking about it with you all. And I want to thank you all very much for your time this evening. This will be recorded, and so you can share it and share it with your friends, and it'll be available to watch actually forever. So with that, I would like to say thank you all, Alexa and Danny and Jenny, and for exploring Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuary with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. It's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. I love it.